Okay, time for a poll. How many of you liked math growing up in school? That's actually a little more than I thought. So I was someone who liked math a lot, actually. I liked the fact that math, pretty much, for most of the math that most of us in this room did, was pretty much consistent, right? 4 plus 4 equals 8. 5 plus 2 equals 7. 10 minus 5 equals 5, right? There's not a whole lot of gray area in the math that we deal with on day to day, right? If you have $50 in your checking account and you write a check for $200 and you go to the bank and you're like, well, I thought it would be $25 left after I wrote that check. That's not going to fly, right? That's not how math works. Math is fairly structured. It's fairly rigid. It's fairly predictable. It doesn't really matter who you are, or where you come from, or where you do the math. It pretty much always is the same. Now, as I said, I'm a black and white type of person. I like that type of thing. But I think there's a problem. Certain things in our lives simply can't be mathematically described. They don't work like that. And our story today is about math that doesn't work out. Our story today finds Jesus, well, he's trying to get away, is actually what he's trying to do. He just found out his cousin had been executed. And it says that he wanted to go away. He wanted to be alone. He wanted a break. He wanted a break from his disciples who didn't seem to get anything right. He wanted a break from the crowds who followed him wherever he goes. He just wanted a break. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe you've had a time in your life where you just wanted to get away from things, where you just wanted a break. You wanted people to stop bothering you, to stop nagging you, to stop asking you for things. You just wanted to get away. And yet the crowds find him. The crowds seek him out. The disciples come after him. And most of us, at least I'll speak for myself, would have been tempted to be like, look, people, shop's closed. I need a break. Go on home. Right? Now, maybe you're a far better person than I am. Maybe if you've been a mom of young kids, you've developed a tolerance for just constantly being needed. But I'm sorry. If I'm trying to mourn and grieve the loss of a loved one and partner in ministry, and 20,000 people show up, I'm not going to be very welcoming. Fortunately, Jesus is better than I, as always is the case, and he leads with compassion. He has compassion on the crowd, and that is where our story gets started. You see, his disciples are not completely clueless people. They know that people get hungry. Now, I don't know. Are you familiar with the phrase, hangry? Right? That's what happens when you cross hungry and angry. I have a son, 10 years old, has been hangry since the time he came out of the womb. Right? If you do not feed this kid on a clock, he kind of melts down. He always has. Now, if I'm one of the disciples, I'm going to put myself in their spot, and I'm talking to Jesus, and I've got 20,000 people. Now, that's a guess, right? It says that there were 5,000 people there, plus the women and the children. So we're just going to say families of 4, in general, gets 20,000, okay? To put this in context, that is PPG Paint's arena full of people. That's a lot of people. And a lot of hungry people. 20,000 hungry people does not sound like a good situation for anyone involved. And they come to him, and I'm going to paraphrase. Hey, boss, you should send everybody home or it's going to get ugly around here. Jesus replies, No. We're good. Just give them something to eat. Boss, we got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. That's all we got. I can only imagine Matthew, the tax collector, the most practical of them all, going, oh, jeez. And Judas pulling out the pocketbook and being like, there's not enough there for anything more. I mean, they had to have sat there and gone, what are we going to do? This happens in the life of the church a lot, actually. Happens in the life a lot of the church. People say things like this. Well, someone just needs to tell them, right? The disciples come to Jesus and like, hey, Jesus, we got a problem. You fix it. Right? That's what they said. We got a problem. You fix it. This happens in the church a lot. All right? Very, very early on in my ministry, I remember a conversation I had with an elder at the church I was serving. And he was very upset about the nursery. And I don't even remember what he was upset about. But he was very upset about something. And he said, well, we just need someone to talk to those parents. And I'll never, ever forget our interim pastor who turned to him and said, thank you for volunteering, and wrote his name down. Now, he immediately backtracked. He said, no, not me. That's exactly what our disciples do in this story. They see there's a problem, they come to Jesus, and he says, well, it's up to you guys to fix it. Here's the honest truth, and this is what Jesus was pointing out to them. In your life and in your church, God only has you to work with. We often in the life of the church think of someone, right? I don't know if you've seen, probably you didn't. There was a parody that came out, and it was a woman walking around the church with a t-shirt that said somebody else. And so, and the joke was, right, it's always somebody else should do this, right? I remember having a conversation with a session, and the session was frustrated. They're very advanced in their years, to say the least. And they said, well, we just need young families to join our church. But you know what the problem is? The problem is parents. Parents today just don't get it. Okay? And my reply, having remembered that conversation from years earlier with the interim, is I simply turned to her and I said, somebody else is not in the building. It's up to you. Somebody else. We do this in our own lives. We do this in the life of the church, where we decide it is somebody else's problem, somebody else's responsibility, not ours, not our role, not us. It's a problem. We identify it, but it's somebody else's responsibility to fix it. Let me say it again. In your life, in your family, and in your church, God only has you. There is no somebody else. I have known churches who have for 30 years waited for somebody else to walk in the building, only to then close their doors when somebody else never came. And I'll come back to this. If you catch yourself saying somebody else, be really careful, because that might be a sign that you've recognized the situation and that God is calling you to step forward. But I'll come back to that. Let's pick up our story again. So they come to Jesus and they say, look, this is all we've got. This isn't going to work. What are we going to do? And this stuck out to me when I read it. Because what happened was that they felt ill-equipped for what Jesus was telling them to do. Right? You give them something to eat. But Jesus, we don't have enough. You do it. But Jesus, we don't have enough. There's a lot of people here. This isn't even enough for a little snack for ourselves. Forget feeding all these people. Jesus, we can't do this. Now, let me tell you this. For thousands of years, the very people that God has called to step forward in any number of roles within his kingdom have not felt equipped for the task to which they have been called. I'll say that again. For thousands of years, the people that God has called to specific tasks and responsibilities and roles in the church have not felt equipped. There's this pithy phrase. I'm not really a big fan of cliches and pithy phrases, but I keep coming back to this one. God does not call the equipped. He equips the called. That's true. God does not call the equipped. He equips the called. And to be even more direct, if you feel comfortable with where you are in your life, if you feel completely at ease, completely comfortable with where things are in the life of your church and in your family and at home, then you don't feel like you're stretching and growing and being challenged, then I'll be really honest with you. You're probably not being as faithful to God as you need to be. There is this pattern throughout Scripture where God's people are constantly being called and stretched to new things. And the very moment that you think you've arrived, you're about to find out that there's a whole new set of seasons of challenges ahead. In my own life, I've gone through a number of different seasons of growth and of change, right? So I did my college years of kind of preparing and wrestling with the call to ministry. I did my seminary years of getting ready to do ministry. Landed in my first call, went into survival mode, kind of those first couple of years. And what I've noticed for all this, right? I was in my first call for 10 years. And after 3 years, I was like, man, I have got it in the bag. Right? You survive anywhere for 3 years. They hadn't fired me. No kid had gotten severely hurt. I mean, things were good. Things were rolling, and it was time to coast. There is a great temptation in life, in our own lives, in the life of our churches, just to coast. To take our foot off the gas and say, we've arrived. We've made it. And what I can tell you is in my own life, every time I hit that, it's time to coast stage, things start to shift on me. And in the early years, I would be like, ooh, I'm going to pretend I don't see that shift happening. I'm going to pretend I don't see that change. I'm going to pretend I don't see that new reality coming. But what I found out is pretending it wasn't there never prevented it from coming. Here's the truth. There's always challenge. There's always growth. There's always change. Your challenge in your life and the life of your church is either you're going to pretend it doesn't exist or you're going to embrace it. And you're going to say, okay, this is where we need to go. This is what is going on. So here's the challenge, to put it bluntly. We have two things that we believe are true. One, there's no one else. There is no somebody else. God only has us. He only has you and me. We're it. All right? We are the solution. But over and over and again, we don't feel called. We don't feel equipped to do the task to which God has called us. Now, here's the good news. That's what most of the people in the Bible thought. They felt, okay, this is what we need to do, but we don't feel as though we're able to do it. Here's the beauty of this story, though. The beauty of this story is in verse 18. I want you to look at it. Look it up. Verse 18. And he said, bring them here to me. Jesus says to his disciples, look, bring what you have. Bring what you've got. And I will do a little, what I'm calling, kingdom math. You see, kingdom math is not like the math that you and I know. In kingdom math, 5 plus 2 does not equal 7. In kingdom math world, 5 plus 2 equals 20,000 people fed plus leftovers for lunches that week. Kingdom math says this. Bring God everything you have. Everything. No, he didn't say, okay, boys, you take 1 fish and 3 loaves, give me the rest, and I'll feed them. That's not how it worked. He said, give me everything. Trust me with everything you are and everything you have. Give it all to me and watch what I can do. Kingdom math means giving over and sacrificing more than you think you want to or can, and letting God multiply it into something that is much, much more. You all are on a series about talking about the body of Christ. And today we talk in parallel to this about the hands, right? We each have hands, all right? We each have hands. These are the hands that God has given you. These are the hands that God has given you to give and to love and to serve. And what God says is, give me whatever is in your hands. Hand it to me and let me do work with it. Here's the deal. There is no plan B in the life of any church. You all are it. There is no somebody else. The hands in this room, those are the only hands that God has to work with. But let me give you an example of how kingdom math works that might be a little more real. In my previous call, I was always in the business of trying to recruit volunteers to work with middle school and high school. Now let me give you a little impersonation of how this works. I got really used to this conversation. Hey, so I was wondering if you would consider working with middle school youth group this year. Right? So first the shock, then the face shake, and then it goes red. And then they go, no. Why not? I mean, middle school is great. Brian, no. Middle school is bad. And they would just walk away. Right? Over and over. I mean, like you would think middle schoolers had the plague or something, the way people react when you ask people to work with middle school. Right? But a couple times, once the freak out was over, once the face stopped shaking, once they kind of calmed down, I could convince them to say yes. I could convince them. And time again, I would watch these people who, when I asked them to work with middle school, would give me the absolute no way, freak out, I can't do this. Slowly step into that world. Who would reach out their hands, right? Who would reach out their hands and give what they could. They would play dodgeball. They would shoot a basketball. They would hold a Bible. They would have conversations. They would give a hug. They would wipe away some tears. These people would take what they had, what God had given them, the hands that they had to love and to serve, and they would give what they could. And I watched over and over again as these adults gave what they could into the lives of these kids. And I watched God do kingdom math with that. The middle school kids, who so desperately need as many adults in their lives as they can, would get another adult. They would get another adult to cheer them on when they succeeded. They would get another adult to give them wise counsel when they needed it. And they would give them another adult to give them a hug when times were tough. But here's the beauty of kingdom math. Kingdom math works both ways. You both give. You do. You give. You give of your money. You give of your time. You give of your effort, your brain power. You give and you give. But when kingdom math is at its best, that comes back to you in blessings beyond what you gave. The adults benefited too. The adults, I talked to them, and they would discover that they had a lot more gifts than they realized. They would discover that they had wisdom that they could share. They would discover a joy and excitement. I still remember one of my volunteers standing up in church one Sunday and saying, I give thanks to God for these middle school kids who inspire me, who teach me. I have not loved coming to church this much in years, but now I do. They excite me. I have learned more about who God is because I have given into their lives. So what do you have to give? Look at your hands. Seriously. Look at your hands. These are the hands that God has given. These are the hands that God has given you. These are the hands that God has called to Hiland Church. And they are the only hands that God has. N.T. Wright, a brilliant New Testament scholar, and I don't normally read from New Testament scholars because normally pastors get really excited about what they write and it doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but I think this one will. Here we go. He wrote this about this. He says, Jesus takes ideas, loaves and fishes, money, a sense of humor, time, energy, talents, love, artistic gifts, skills with words, quickness of eye or fingers, whatever we have to offer. He holds them before his Father with prayer and blessing. Then breaking them so they are ready for use, he gives them back to us to to give to those who need them. And now they are both ours and not ours. They are both what we had in mind and not what we had in mind. They are something greater and different, more powerful and mysterious, and yet also our own. It is part of genuine Christian service, at whatever level, that we look on in amazement to see what God has done with the bits and pieces we dug out of our meager resources to offer to Him. If there's one line to describe Kingdom Math, here it is. It's what he said. Something greater and different, more powerful, mysterious, yet also our own. Over and over, I've seen people of deep faith and of little faith invest 5 and 2, their 5 and 2, whatever it was. Invest what they had, offer their hands, and get something back that was more and different than they ever could have imagined. So, this is, in the life of your church, a critical time. Your PNC is doing excellent work. I can attest to that. I'm in conversation with them constantly. Your stewardship campaign is in the process of its very beginning, and your interim pastor is leading you well. It is a critical time for Hiland as you look forward into the next chapter of your ministry and who this church is going to be. And the hands that God has called here are your own. So today I'm going to ask you very honestly to reflect today. What is it that you are going to give? Not just financially, although financially too. What is it that you are going to give to Hiland in this season? What is it are you going to offer to Jesus to allow Jesus to break and transform and to do kingdom math? To give back something greater and different, more powerful and mysterious, and yet your own. Because the way kingdom math works is you take whatever it is that you have, whatever is in your hands, whatever God has given, and you give it. You hand it over of your time, of your talent, of your resources, and you watch Jesus take it, break it, give it back, and send it out. My friends, in this season, what is it that you are going to give? What is God calling you to use the hands that you have to give in order that His kingdom, through this church, might flourish and grow in the next year, 5, 10, and on until Jesus Himself returns? My friends, it is my prayer for you and for all of us that we would not shy away from the challenges and the seasons of stretching and growing, but that we would embrace them with open hands and say, God, here is what I have to give. I entrust it to you. Do with it as you please. Your will, not mine, be done.